Hey, welcome back to Gold Scratch. So we're at the second video now of building Blakely's 340 MOPAR for Blakely Kimball. And what we're going to try and do, I got Alec here. It's, coordinate to get somebody working on the camera is an issue. So I got Alec available. So we're going to try and cover as much of this detail of this job as we can for you. And I'm in uncharted territory. It's not a small block Chev, it's a MOPAR. And you guys got any better ideas, I'm listening. But I've done some research. I'm trying to think it through, trying to work methodically. And a lot of things, mechanics, clearances, oil pressure, all that stuff is common to every kind of engine. So we're just applying that logic. So we're going to try and cover today. We covered off some stuff yesterday. And we're going to try and cover 4 things today. Fitting the pistons, I've got something to show you there. Installing cam bearings, I already got them in, but I'm going to show you, it's not a job I'd recommend you do anyway. I'm going to show you some stuff about that. The oiling system, how the oiling system works. It's always good to understand what's going on with your oiling system, where the oil comes from, where it goes to. And then we're going to actually show you how you can verify that oil is getting to all the bearings. So that's my kind of sleep at night tactic, because once I see that little bit of oil drip out of the bearing, I know that it's going to get there when the engine's running, and I don't have to worry about it. So and how we prepared the crankshaft for this engine. The crankshaft was in really nice shape, and so we did a few things to it. I'm going to show you that. And then in the previous video, we talked about paint. Well, in the previous video, it was only primered. So I did my best, Mike. The tip we had yesterday, tip of the day yesterday we got from Daryl was to put the paint, it's not Chevy orange, by the way. This is Chrysler Hemi orange. Anyway, to put the paint in hot water. And so I did that and let the paint warm up as much as possible. Yesterday, the block was masked and primered. And I put one coat on before supper, come out and put another coat on later, and put another coat on this morning. And I did my best, Mike and Blakely. I got as good a job as I could. One of the things to watch out for if you're going to heat up your paint is on a flat surface. On cast iron, it's pretty safe to paint because the cast iron is rough and it kind of grabs a hold of the paint. On a flat surface, there's one machine flat surface at the front. And the first time I did it, I got a bit of a run. So I waited till it dried, sanded it down, repaired it basically. So that's one thing to watch for when your paint's thinner. It's going to run faster. So we're going to do this in a series of clips. The first clip I'm going to show is how we fit the pistons or check the fit of the pistons. We mentioned already this block's been to the machine shop. It's now bored 40 thou over. So a standard bore for a 340 is 40400. It was 40700, 4070, and now it's 4080. So we've had it bored. We bought hyper-eutectic pistons for it, and so the recommended clearance for hyper-eutectic pistons, they can be fit a little tighter. Why is that? Hyper-eutectic pistons have a lot of silicone in them, and it gives it strength, and the thermal expansion is less than it is for a forged piston, for example, and they're typically also lighter. So the recommended clearance for 4 to 4.1 is 1.5 thousandths, 0015 to 0020. We'll put a screenshot, I'll take a picture of this, put a screenshot of it. And then for 4.1 and up is 0020 to 0025. Well, we want to get that 0020 to 0025, even though 1.5 would be okay according to this. It's going to be a high performance engine. It's going to see some RPM, so we're going to err on the looser side. And in fact, you could even probably go looser than that. It would be okay. So what happens is, we use this dial bore gauge and a micrometer. The pistons are installed on the rods now. The rods are numbered, so you line the piston numbers up with the rods. pistons are installed on the rods, and I just randomly installed all the pistons, then I started measuring. And so what I found out was, if Alec wants to come in here, this is just my rough measurements. We will make a spreadsheet of this like everything else. But I've got my 0023, 0021, 2221, and number 422, number 823, but number 6 I only had 18, and number 7 I had 0025. So that's okay. And if I left it there, would it be all right? Of course, it would be fine. The engine wouldn't hurt anything, but I'd like to get it over that 0020. So I swapped number 6 piston and number 2 piston. So I put the biggest piston in the biggest hole and the smallest piston in the smallest hole. Now, I'm saying that as if there's a lot of variation. First of all, the machining of the block is plus or minus 1/10 of a thou at most. And when you buy pistons, they are a match set. So 4.790 is the size of these pistons, and plus or minus 1/10 at the most. So they're pretty accurate, but if you have your biggest piston in your smallest hole, you're going to be a little bit tight. So I swapped those pistons. So let's just verify that I got it right. So number 6 piston, this is number 6 now. This piston used to be in number 2. So what am I saying? Number 6 is, should now be 0089. So let's put the micrometer on it and turn my back on here, sorry. So this is the one that was tight before. So I'm going to just fit. So that, by the way, that's where that little dimple there is where you check the dimensions of a piston. This coating that comes on the piston is like a break-in coating, but and that's actually got some thickness to it, so you always check 90 degrees to the pin, which that is already. So I got 0089, and where am I here now? Okay, now we put that in our zero the dial bore gauge. There we go. Okay, finally. So we're at number 6. Come this side, Alec, because the dial's on this side, right? And there I got just over 0022, which is what I was trying to accomplish. So before I had 18 there, 25 here, swap the pistons. Now I've got 0022 on both. So now, did I have to do that? No. If you would have installed the pistons, they'd have been fine. But, you know, this is blueprinting. We're trying to get it right. So now I can say to Blakely that we've got all your pistons between 2 thou and 2.5 thousandths of an inch piston to cylinder wall clearance. I thought I'd like to show you, if you're interested, oiling systems. It's always nice to understand two things. Understand how the oiling system works when you're working on an engine, and then also knowing how you can verify that you've got all the little oil holes lined up properly so that everything's getting oil. Your camshaft is getting oil. In this case, the oil, these holes also feed the cylinder head, which feeds the rocker arm shafts and main bearings. And this mentioned yesterday is priority main oiling. So if Alec wants to come in here, we'll kind of show you how it gets started. So I mentioned yesterday a little secret plug that's right there. And so the oil, when the main bearing cap is on, the oil pump is bolted to the main bearing, and oil goes down through that aperture right there. Okay, and So it tries to go down, it runs into that plug. So if you look from the back, the purpose of the plug is, the plug will be right in there, okay? So the oil goes down, and then it can't go past the plug, so it goes out, following this arrow, fills the oil filter from the outside, and then the pressure side goes in from the inside of the oil filter, comes out this way, and then this is lined up with the main oil galley that feeds the valve lifters. And as it's doing that, it's also feeding the main bearing. So if you see, there's two holes drilled in the main bearing cap. I haven't got the cap in here right now. So that one lines up. So the oil comes from there, from that galley that goes all the way along the block, there, up to the main bearing, and then after it does that, it goes back down and feeds the cam bearing. I think I actually put a little, no, feeds the cam bearing, and that is true all the way along. Now when we get to the very front, this is very similar to a Pontiac, by the way. So there's the same, you can see in the casting, if you look at the external part of your casting, you can kind of figure it out. So that's the oil coming from the main galley that also feeds the valve lifters on this side. So then it feeds the cam bearing from here straight down, and then it feeds this side, and there's another tunnel that feeds the valve lifters. This would be on the driver's side of the engine, okay? That's how they get fed. This is the passenger side. And then this galley is terminated, and that's why there's an extra plug on this galley. If you look down in there, the casting doesn't go, and that's the hole for your distributor drive to come out. So how do you know if when you install the cam bearings? Now, we'll talk about cam bearings in this clip. I already installed the cam bearings. If you're doing your first MOPAR or Chevy, it's not a job I'd recommend you do. If you want to do it, do some homework on it. When I'm doing Chevys, I have a custom tool just for Chevrolet small blocks. It's very easy to do, but for every other engine, it's a universal tool. You have these little chucks that fit on the end. The bearing fits onto the shaft. The shafts, you have to have the block off the engine stand to do that, and we drive the cam bearings in, and there's a little hole in the cam bearing that has it lined up perfectly with a hole in the block. So right now that hole is on the top side. So how do you verify that you got the hole in the right place? In this case, if we just squirt some oil down in there, okay, we should see it come out. There you go. You can see it come out of the cam bearing. So you can do that all the way along, okay? And in this case, this is going down to the other galley. But just to give you the idea, what I typically do after I install the bearings, take a lot of time and care to make sure the holes are lined up, that everything's going to get oil according to the process I just showed you, and then take an oil can. And then what's unique about a 340, a small block Dodge, is that, as I mentioned yesterday, they have rocker shafts, and the rocker shaft on the driver's side is fed through this little hole. So in the case of the cam bearing in this location and the cam bearing in this location, there's actually 3 holes in that bearing. One of them is redundant. But if I now squirt some oil into this little hole, you should see it, there it is, come out in the cam bearing, and then it'll actually drip out, and it's going to be dripping on the ground now because we don't have a crankshaft in place. So, and the same thing is true on the passenger side. They're symmetrical. This hole feeds the passenger side, and this hole feeds the driver's side. Now, in the case of a 340 MOPAR, I didn't know that myself not long ago, so because I'm doing one, I had to do some homework on it. So that's about camshaft bearing install. Once again, I can't show you that because I already got it done. There was no one around to show that. They're a little different than a Chev. The block's got to come off the stand because I cannot get a straight shot at it when it's on the stand. to drive my tool in to fit it, but the cam bearings are fit in. And if you look at the previous clip, the camshaft, the old camshaft, the purple camshaft that we're not using, we always put a test cam in to make sure it turns nice, and it does. So that's one issue that we have behind it. Plug for the cam bearing, I've never seen this before. Typically they're very similar to frost plug. And I put all the frost plugs in. Well, I had the block off the engine stand. I put all the valley plugs. There's also a plug. If you look down in here, Alec, there's a plug here. This is the side that gets the filters on the other side. This is the side that gets fed last. So that's the end of that galley that feeds the lifters and the crankshaft. So there's a plug goes there, and another plug that caps it off, and then the plug that goes in the back of the camshaft. Never seen this one before. I had to go onto a thread, and it actually goes in like I show it, and then it's got a little bulge in it, and when you dimple that bulge, it helps to expand it and tightens it against the block, and hopefully we're not going to have any leaks. We're back, and so we're going to show how to install a frost plug, a freeze plug, a core plug. Call it whatever you want. So let's cover that off. So there's various holes in the block. In this case, there's 3 on each side of the main part of the block. There's 2 in the back and 2 more in the front. And that's pretty typical. Small block Chev only has 2 unless it's a 400. So why are those holes there? So in the casting process, when the block is being cast into a mold, everywhere you don't see metal was sand during the casting process. Why sand? Because sand has a melting point higher than 3,000 degrees, so it's not going to melt, and that's why you have to use, and because it's a commodity that you can get in and out. So these holes are present during the casting so that you can get the sand back out after the casting is completed. But they serve another purpose, and that's why they're commonly called frost plugs or freeze plugs, because sometimes it works. If the block were to freeze, when water freezes and turns from a liquid to a solid, it expands, and there's no force in the world is going to hold it back. Something's going to have to give. So if your block is completely rigid, it will crack, and it happens all the time. Particularly too with race cars, because guys park their race car over the winter and they don't think about draining the block. They don't use antifreeze, they use water, and they come back in the spring and there's a little puddle under it, and that's a sickening feeling, because you know you probably got a cracked block. So in any case, that's why they use freeze plugs. Now when the freeze plug works, if the expansion takes place, and usually in the tightest spots, it'll actually push that plug out and relieve the pressure, and in some cases may prevent the block from cracking. Good luck. Don't depend on it. Make sure you drain your block in the wintertime. So we're going to install one. Now this is no different than if it was a Chevrolet or a Ford or a Dodge or whatever, pretty much similar. So I have it says here, freeze plug driver on it. So the freeze plug, these are nice brass ones. I always like to use brass ones. It's a nice contrast, and the size is on there. There's a number on there. I always like to get them installed with the number pointing up or pointing level, the way it should be if you read it. So I'll put a little black mark there, and as long as I have that black mark on the bottom, it's going to be there. So it's a good idea to seal it. Now I'm sure guys install them sometimes and don't, and probably works okay, but it's probably safer if you do. I always do. So you just put some of this stuff. What is this stuff? Permatex thread sealant. There you go. Okay. Now there's different things that you can use, but that's what I use, and it served me well. I have never had one leak, so touch wood, we'll keep doing it. As long as it keeps working, we'll keep doing it that way. So there we go. I got my little black mark up. Takes a pretty good hit to get it in there. So I just get it lined up with the block. it's in. That's all there is to it. So repeat 10 times or whatever it is to finish it. So that's all it takes. If it's not flush, one of the things, don't keep driving until you drive it in too deep. Put it on the side until you hit it and it becomes flush with the block. That way you won't overdrive it. And that's the frost plug. So while we're rolling, while the cameras are rolling, we wanted to cover one more thing, and that's the crankshaft. Now, when we disassembled this engine, I talked about it. The crankshaft was in really nice condition. The clearances were okay. They actually were a little on the tight side, and we're going to find out. I have not tried to fit the crankshaft bearings yet, but the main bearings were a little bit tight, but the crankshaft's in great shape. So all I did was polish it with 600 grit emery paper. Now, if ever ran across this, you can buy this lots of places probably. I bought it on Amazon, I'll admit that. So it has every grit from 150, 240, 320, 400 to 600. So I'm using 600 grit paper, and just lightly go over, after I cleaned it, lightly go over all the surfaces just to kind of polish them. Now, is that as good as a machine shop polishing job? No. Is it good enough? Yes. If I hadn't done anything, it would have been fine because this crankshaft was in nice shape, but I wanted to give it a nice micro finish, and the 600 grit is a nice fine finish. We're not taking any metal off. We're not changing clearances. We're just making it smooth and shiny so the oil can flow. So got that covered. So the next step, which will be in another video that I'm going to do, is put the crankshaft bearings in and start measuring up with the dial bore gauge again. I got to get a new setup to do that. Finish putting the frost plugs in, and we'll come back to you with more. So one last note, we always ask to like and subscribe. Everybody does that. Why do they do that? Because it helps them. And watching videos, subscribing, all that's free. Making videos isn't. It takes time, costs money, and this is not the fast way to get an engine together when you have to stop and video every little step. But I do enjoy doing it. I enjoy sharing knowledge we've gained doing this and learning from you guys. But if you help me by subscribing, it'll make it even more fun to do. So thank you for watching Gold Scratch.